Welcome everybody, Shir number 969. We're learning today Lili Nishmas Moshe Doiv Ben Rabban Zizel. Lili Nishmas Blima Basra Moshe L'Refuah Shalema Baruch Menachem Ben Fega Reza. Shtakav Refuah Shalema B'Soich Shar Chayla Yisrael. Getting back to a malacha of MEMACHAIK and MEMAREACH. So I just want to talk a minute about ointments a little bit in reference to how to put it on. Sometimes somebody needs certain medical ointments and these type of things, and we're not going to get into the whole issue of refuah, how that works. But let's say in a case whereby one needs it, and so on. But lamaisa, in ointment itself, let's say a thick ointment that those thick ointments that don't flow, they don't move, and that's it. The regular thick ointments. Just squeezing it out of the tube, that's not the problem. To squeeze the ointment out of the tube is not the problem. The problem again is the smearing aspect of it, whereby that is taka aser and aser l'chayrim min atayra, because that's a real going into a real memachek, memarech, the real thick ointments. Now, but let's say somebody taka needs it, so there's a way of doing it that you could dab it on, just to give like a light dab. The poskim taka say to throw it on, dab it on. Okay. Okay, so just to read from the Sefer Learning Shabbos in 3 minutes, the way he puts it down, the Maisa, one may dab ointment onto a wound without smearing it. Again, dabbing is not the problem. The problem is the smearing. That's what he brings down. The Maisa Chazal only forbade the smearing part, but not the applying part. Now we're talking about onto the body itself. We're not going to get into the bandage issue right now and so on. But he brings down the Maisa Chila She'ein Boi Sakana, which is a person who is ill to the point of needing bed rest and so on, not whereby a person's life is in danger. That's a separate issue. Obviously, everything goes then, but a person's a chayil by sakana, and he has a lot of pain and so on, or possibly by a baby, taka by a diaper rash, these type of things, and they need these ointments like Desitin, like a very thick type of an ointment. So then to smear it on, they cannot do, but it's very simple. Just to squeeze it, like we said, squeezing it out of the tube is okay, and then you may dab the ointment or the antiseptic cream or so on onto the wound or the rash and gently place a band-aid or bandage over it in conjunction with the halachas of Shabbos as far as the bandage goes. Now, the fact that it might smear by itself afterwards by the baby moving or the person moving or so on, so if it smears by itself is not a problem. That's not the issue. The issue is when one goes ahead and smears it, the way people smear regularly. Okay, just a minute just to read from the Sefer Lamites Malachas on page 923. The way he brings it down into English in reference to squeezing from the tube. One might think, well, if I squeeze out an ointment from the tube as it comes out, it's really being, smoothened out. As it goes through the hole, it smoothens out the ointment. So maybe that's a problem. So Lamaisi brings it down that he says if the cream or ointment is in a tube, for example, to get it out, first step you have to get it out right before you do anything. Squeezing the tube to extract the cream or the ointment for that matter is permissible, but care must be taken only to dab. Like we said, the dabbing effect is easier to work with in most cases, but the smearing effect, that's the problem. To dab it from the tube onto the, let's say the baby would has a baby, the diaper rash and so on, but not to rub it, to smear it onto the skin. So what's the problem with why don't we have a problem with squeezing it out of the tube whereby it's smoothing it out? So he brings down the mice that the actual squeezing of the tube is not mimareach, even though the ointment forms a smooth stream. You're really smoothing out the ointment as it comes out. But this is okay because the smoothing effect is completely unintentional. Unintentional. It's the person is not to have no kavan at all to smoothen out the ointment. They just want to get it out of the tube, and therefore be totally outside of the premise of the malacha of memachik. And again, like we said before, lamaisa, once the cream or ointment is dabbed on to the child in the where the diaper goes on and so on. So it is then permitted, of course, to put the is permitted to put the diaper onto the child, of course, in the ordinary manner. Even though the cream or the ointment or whatever it is will spread and smear with the baby's movements. Obviously, the baby's not neschaven and it's a baby and so on. Okay, so now the question is, what about if the ointment or whatever the case is, the thick cream that has to be applied to the baby's rash and so on is in a bottle. So from a tube, we said you could squeeze it on, you dab it on from the tube. But let's say it's in a bottle, it's whereby you have to. How do you get it out? You can't squeeze it out, right? So like a Vaseline type of a bottle. So he brings down the Sefer Lamites Malachas from the Shmir Shabbos HILCHOS actually. If the cream or ointment is coming from a jar, a bottle, a jar, a larger thing whereby you can't squeeze it out, then it's recommended that a Q-tip or a spoon, right? Be the Shmir Shabbos Hilchos uses the word of a stick or so on, but something like that, a Q-tip, spoon, or so on, be used to remove the cream from the container instead of one's finger, not to use one's finger. If a Q-tip is used, he brings down the Sefer Tes Malachas. This all can be found on page 923. If a Q-tip is used, one should be mindful not to squeeze or press the cotton tip against the skin, and also not to rub it. Again, we're doing a dabbing action. It's a dabbing action, just putting it straight on and then diapering the baby. In all cases, one must be extremely careful to apply the cream or ointment to the skin surface by pressing motions only, dabbing, pressing motions only, and not with a lateral, which means side to side movements. The side to side lateral movements, that is the problem of MEMACHAIK, of smearing. He brings also to the Sefer Lamites Malachas that if the cream or ointment is coming from a tube, like we spoke about before, it may be squeezed onto the flat surface by, for example, like the back of a spoon or so on, to squeeze it on, and pressed, but not smeared. Pressing, we said, is okay, but not the smearing part. That is the problem against the skin. That can't be done. Now, again, I want to make it clear that we're talking right now about the thicker creams, ointments, the thicker ones, like the Desitin type, consistency. When we get to the thinner ones, that the lessons, it gets a little bit easier in certain instances. We'll have to see how that works. But right now, we're trying to just talk about the thicker densities, whereby if somebody, let's say during the week, they take it onto their finger, it's just there, it just stays there. It could just stay. It could stand up straight, basically, and that type of thing. You have these type of thick creams, you have these type of desitins. Okay, so just to end off the Sefer Lamites Malachas, the Maisa brings down also in reference to, let's say, if somebody, we mentioned before, somebody has a wound, right, or the question of getting infected and so on. So the same thing when it comes to a ointment or a cream, a thick cream. Similarly, one may apply in a antibiotic ointment type of a thing onto a wound if it's infected, or there's a question that it might become infected and so on, by using the same method like we spoke about. By the ointment, it could be squeezed out of the tube and dabbed on. He brings down further to the Sefer Lamites Malachas, a band-aid may then be placed over the wound, right? A person can put the band-aid onto the wound without smearing the ointment. Again, you want to be careful not to smear the ointment while applying the band-aid. The ointment should not be applied to the band-aid. That's the question. That's what he brings down. The ointment should not be applied to the band-aid. First, for fear that one might forgetfully smear this and spread it onto the gauze. So you put it on the wound itself, and then you just apply a band-aid onto that. Okay, we're going to end off over here, but just the main thing to always keep in mind, the main klal in this memarech, when it comes to ointments and creams, these thicker type of substances, consistencies. So the bottom line is to be careful not to do a side-to-side movement by putting it on, and only pressing motions. Okay, we'll stop here. Thank you so much for listening. Aslach and bracha, kol tov.